Hello, Gloria. How are you? Thanks for being with us today. It's an honor to meet you in person.
Thank you, Ana Maria. Likewise, it's an honor to be part of this session, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. So for our viewers watching, Gloria will make a short presentation followed by some questions from me. So over to you, Gloria.
Thank you, Ana Maria. It's an honor to be part of this important session. Thank you to not only you, but also the organizers for putting this together, especially under the current challenges that we're facing. It is crucial to work together to align ourselves, especially to have a recovery. Now, let me share what's going on from WTTC and what is it that we're doing as we celebrate the event that we're having. As WTTC represents the global private sector, 30 years ago, this council was created. A little bit over 200 CEOs from around the world are our members. Currently, Krishna Seta, who's the CEO for Hilton Worldwide, he's our chairman, and we have vice chairs all over the world. Here you have some faces that they're very familiar with you, as we represent all the industries, not only hotels, airlines, airports, cruises, OTAs, all the different industries within the ecosystem have a voice at WTTC, and not only from travel, but also organizations that they do business and they depend on travel and tourism. For 30 years, we have been speaking as one voice. Our members have defined the strategy for our sector and to have this sustainable growth. But we have also done a lot of research. We have done research in 185 countries around the world, and that's how we know the importance and the contribution for travel and tourism. These are some numbers from last year where we were able to quantify 10% of the global GDP is the contribution from travel and tourism. For 9 consecutive years, as you can see in the chart below, we have outpaced the growth of the economy. And of course, last year was not the exception, where we grew 3.5% versus 2.5%. That was the average growth of the economy. And more important is 330 million jobs around the world. That was a contribution from travel and tourism. That's 1 in 10 jobs. And from all the numbers here, I would say the one that I enjoy the most or I like the most is when you look at the last 5 years, all the industries, all the sectors, the new jobs, the jobs created, 1 in 4 were from travel and tourism, which speaks about the importance of our sector and, of course, the contribution that we do. So, and as I say, we have been measuring this. I know that you as well. The business travel, as you see there, is very significant. And Congress, we consider that a part of business travel. The exhibition industry, of course, is very important. These are numbers from you that I understand that you also use Oxford Economics, and it speaks about how relevant this sector is and how important it is to get Congress back, because that's part of the backbone for trade. We cannot continue doing business virtual. We have seen a lot of slowdown, and Congress bring a great opportunity to not only bring everyone together, but do a lot of businesses and help us to recover. So this is a very important segment, as you have there. Almost 200 billion was the contribution from last year, and more than 3 million jobs directly impacted. Now, let me tell you a little bit about why COVID has been unprecedented and the impact to our sector. These are some numbers from us. And you will see here that according to our estimation, 142 million jobs have been already impacted, unfortunately. $3.8 trillion, which is pretty sad. Domestic, we have seen some recovery in some countries, but unfortunately, the point is international. International is still down. And if we continue with this, if we don't resume international travel, unfortunately, it seems that this number by the end of the year might grow to 174 million jobs, which is not good. Now, not only we do economic impact research and understand the size of especially COVID has been affecting our sector, but we also do a lot of research in past situations. We launched a report where we analyze all different crises in the last 20 years, very specific 90 situations that impacted our sector. We divided between weather-related, for instance, outbreak, political instability, or security or terrorism attack. And it was interesting because the worst of all, of course, is political instability. It took us longer to recover in the last 20 years. It was 22 months, as you can see there, with minimum 10 months. 22 is the average. But then the second worst was the outbreaks, where it took us 10 months minimum and almost 20 months in average. Now, very important here, we believe at WTTC that we need to learn from the past, and we need to learn also from each other and share a lot of best practices. And there are 3 lessons learned that we have been talking at WTTC that I would like to share with you quickly. The first one is when we work together, when we have had an international coordination and good public and private collaboration, we have recovered faster. And that was the case of the financial crisis, where we had a huge impact, but we recovered in 18 months. When we don't have that international coordination, for instance, to resume travel, and we don't have that public and private collaboration, and we have different protocols, it takes longer to recover. And that's exactly what happened in 9/11. And then what's also interesting, how we were able to recover from SARS, MERS, and Ebola when we didn't have a vaccine and we were able to travel. So some lessons learned there. And let me show you some graphics about what I'm talking about to put it in context. If you look at the top left chart, you will see there, that's the world. The white line is the economy. The green line is travel and tourism. Look at the 2 situations that I just explained. 9/11 is the first one. We took 3 to 4 years to recover because it was a U shape. The blue bars, by the way, are jobs. Now, the financial crisis, it was a V shape. We recovered faster in 18 months. Now, if you look at the top right, that's the G20, which basically is that whatever happens in the G20, that those are sourcing markets for travel and tourism and a lot also for Congress. You will see there that whatever happens there has a direct impact in the world. Now, look at the bottom right. That is China in the last 20 years. And they had a situation there with the outbreak of SARS. And in that case, they were able to recover despite that there was not a vaccine. They were able to isolate. So we need to learn from what they did and also what they are doing right now, because the reality is that China has recovered already domestic, despite that there is not a vaccine. And I understand that COVID is different to the virus that we had in the SARS in that situation of MERS and Ebola because of the asymptomatic, but the importance of testing is crucial. So, and that's why after these lessons learned and analyzing a lot of the last crises that we have seen in the last 20 years, WTTC and our members and the different industries, we came up with 4 principles for recovery. 4 things that they are needed to recover our sector. The first one is we need to have this coordinated approach. We need to have an international coordinated approach to reopen borders so that we can remove travel barriers and you don't have quarantines, for instance. You can do testing instead of quarantines and only isolate the people infected. The second one is we need to look at the seamless travel experience. And then the travel experience has a before and after the vaccine. We cannot wait for a vaccine to be widely spread and around the world. We need to be able to resume international travel before. And in order to do that, we believe that we can include testing before departure, a quick rapid test that will give you the results in 10 minutes or less. And then all the negatives will be allowed to board the plane and with contact tracing. And at the same time, once that we see the vaccine being distributed, then you can have a health certificate included and be transitioning and getting from the testing to the vaccine. Then, of course, the protocols, the international testing protocols, very important to be consistent. Let's make sure that we don't make the same mistake that we made in 9/11, where every country implemented their own protocols for safety, for instance, for screening at the airports. And even after 19 years before COVID, going to the airports before we had the outbreak, it was a different experience. But let's remember that in 9/11, it took us a while to rebuild trust from the traveler because all these different protocols. So protocols are key. And the last one, but not least, is we need to have the support from the governments. Not all the sectors have been impacted the same, right? Our sector has been impacted the most, and it is crucial to continue having the support for the workers and liquidity, the fair payments, whatever can be done so that we can recover faster. Because let's remember, a lot of the participants in our sector, 80% are SMEs, 54% women, 30% youth. It's a very diverse sector and is very connected. And that's what is so crucial to continue supporting that. Now, let me explain really quick about the protocols that I say. Let's think about when we were in the peak of the outbreak. The hotels, our members, offer rooms for free to doctors and nurses. These doctors and nurses took care of patients, right, during the day. And in the evenings, they were sleeping in these hotels. And we were able to maintain those installations COVID-free. Why was that? The protocols that they were implemented. Those protocols, plus the expertise from WHO, CDC, and a lot of our members went in place. And that's how we define the protocols, for instance, for hospitality. Then we went and worked with Congress and events, of course, and all the experts to help and adopt their protocols for the Congress and events and conventions. Similar with tour operators, the theme parks, and with ICAO, ACI, and IATA, the protocols for aviation and for airlines and airports, for instance. So we came up with all these protocols because the goal at the end of the year is, at the end of the day, is to offer exactly the same experience. If I'm in a hotel in London, Madrid, or Mexico City, or New York, the experience has to be the same. If I take a flight here or a flight in Latin America or Asia, it needs to be the same. I have to be asked to wear a mask, and that would help us to rebuild trust from the traveler. Now, those protocols have been implemented globally, and what we have defined is a stamp. This stamp is not a certification, it is only a recognition. It is a recognition for the countries and destinations that they have implemented protocols at the level of the global private sector. So far, we have granted the Safe Travel stamp to different players around the world, especially as you can see here in this map. We have a little bit over 190 countries and destinations. Countries in Latin America, such as Colombia, Argentina, Peru, to name some of those. Countries, for instance, in Africa, such as Egypt, Saudi Arabia, a lot of destinations in Europe, in Asia. These are just some examples that these countries have implemented, and these destinations, the protocols at the same level than the private sector, which is one step ahead in the direction for the recovery. And we're very happy because this is helping the travelers to identify who has implemented these protocols. Now, I talk about the coordination, the international coordination, and the difference between 9/11 and 2008 financial crisis. And one of the platforms that helped us a lot was the G20. In October 7, there was a very important meeting, which was the G20 for the Ministers of Tourism. And for the first time ever, under the presidency of Saudi Arabia, CEOs were invited to participate. WTTC has participated always since the beginning, but we never had a session just for the private sector. And per request from Saudi Arabia, we presented a plan to recover 100 million jobs. And this plan has 12 commitments that are needed from the private sector, such as flexibility in bookings, for instance, providing an insurance for COVID and things like that. And it also includes 12 things that we need from governments, because it is very clear we cannot do this alone. The private sector cannot bring back all these jobs and livelihoods alone. We need to have the work from the governments. And the good news is that the plan was fully endorsed and supported by all the countries of the G20, and we're moving in the right direction. We're working with air corridors, for instance, between New York and London, or Europe and the US, and some countries in Latin America or Asia. We're working with an international testing protocol where we can do testing based on risk assessment in those countries, and moving in the right direction, because the goal here is to resume international travel. We need to resume international travel in order to have the Congress back, in order to have all these jobs back, all these livelihoods impacted. Finally, let me talk about aviation and IATA. Very important if you can help us to share this news, and I'm not sure that you have seen it. IATA released a report where they say so far this year, 1.2 billion people have flown, they have taken a flight somewhere in the world this year. And only we have been able to prove 44 cases. They don't know if they got COVID in the flight or before or when, but somehow they were able to track 44 cases. That's 1 in 27 million. 1 in 27 million. And at the same time, this is important to highlight that this was before we implemented the protocols. Now, at the same time, the air in the planes is purified every 3 minutes. According to the expert, is similar to what you have, for instance, in an operational room in a hospital. So the information is there. It is pretty safe to travel. You have less possibilities to get COVID while you travel. You have more chances, actually, when you go to a supermarket or other places where you have more contact with some people that might be infected. But we all have to learn to coexist with this virus and contain the spread. For the next and last meetings and conventions, I believe this sector is very important. International business travel needs to be resumed. In a way, is the backbone of the global economy. If we don't have international travel, it's going to be very complicated to recover. Business travel, as I say, very crucial, very important. And of course, Congress and conventions. When you look at the most important source of markets for Congress and conventions, you have the US, Germany, China, UK. China is already having meetings. China is already have Congress and conventions. We need to learn from what they are doing. And we also need to learn from each other and implement the right protocols, the right policies, work together so that we can resume international travel and bring back the jobs impacted. Thank you, Ana Maria, again. Hopefully this was interesting. And now back to you so that we can have some questions. And you're doing a very important job by bringing everyone together, and I appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Gloria. So amazing presentation. Yeah, let me ask you some questions. So the first is, both WTTC and UFI members rely on the restart of international travel. How can the exhibition industry support your efforts to lobby and advocate for a change in policy?
I think it's very important. That's a great question. Very important, the work that you do. And as you also speak with facts and numbers and data of the jobs impacted and all of that, is to help us to reinforce our message. We're telling the governments they need to stop just talking about containing the spread to how do we contain the spread in a responsible way, resume international travel. It is possible. What we have seen in some parts of the world is that these second waves, they have nothing to do with travel. That's a community-to-community transmission. So we need to learn to coexist with this virus, and we cannot wait for a vaccine. And also the governments, they have to help us to implement these international testing protocols so that we can do testing, for instance, before we have the Congress. That would help, plus wearing the mask and the protocols to resume some of the events that they're very much needed for the local economies and the global economy as well. So reinforcing our message, basically, and partnering with us, that would be great, country by country.
Okay. Okay, my second question is, once the exhibition industry has the permission to reopen, maybe some of our customers will be afraid of traveling because of a long period of isolation they had in the previous month. So how are your members preparing to encourage them to feel safe? And in the same line, how do we tell our customers to feel safe?
Yeah, that's a great question. But let me answer in two ways. The first one is we have done a lot of research. Our members have done a lot of research. And for instance, there was one recently in the US, to give you an example, where they asked, are you ready to start planning your international trip? And 70% of the respondents say absolutely yes. We want to travel to Europe, Mexico, and the Caribbean as an example, right? In that case, it is clear that what the travelers, they don't want is that the uncertainty. They don't want to be impacted and stuck in a country. So there are some demographic groups that they are ready to travel and they are not afraid, as long as we have the right protocols in place. So it's two components. One is that we need to continue working to remove travel barriers with governments, such as the quarantines, and do testing, and only put in quarantine the people that tested positive, regardless if they have the symptoms or not. And then in the other end, we need to make sure that we implement the protocols and we talk about it and we have testimonials. It will be very helpful if your members can help us to share testimonials. I flew, from instance, from London to Greece. I had a great experience. I felt very comfortable. And that allowed me to travel again to Saudi Arabia, now then to Mexico and the US. So once you start traveling, you're going to feel comfortable. But we need to share a lot of this information with your participants of Congress and with others so that they feel comfortable.
Okay. Okay, moving on to the third question. There will be a lot of changes in the airline industry in the next 10 years or so. So, for instance, much of the overcapacity will disappear alongside with the important number of low-cost travel routes. So what do you think is going to be the landscape for the business traveler?
Well, I believe that if you see in every single situation that we had a crisis in the past, every single time we recovered and we had growth. I say it took us 3 to 4 years after 9/11, but once we got it, we had growth. The financial crisis, the following year, we had growth. Every single year we had growth. So I believe once we have the vaccine widely spread and once we can resume international travel with testing protocols, we're going to start seeing some growth. Now, I really hope that we're not going to go back and have less offered and have the same demand. Hopefully, it's going to be a good balance. I don't believe that low cost are going to disappear. We'll still believe that there's going to be space for them, or at least that's what I've seen in the market where we have the most low cost is Europe, for instance. The business travel is going to continue, is going to grow, as we have seen in every single interruption in the past. However, they might change, or they might be a little bit different. For instance, Zoom, Skype, and all these virtual tools have been here for years. Now we're forced to use them. But for some meetings, perhaps if before you were traveling for 1 hour meeting, perhaps now you're going to do a Zoom. But it is very clear that the experience that you get in a Congress, you will never get that virtually, right? Or an experience that you have in a meeting for 1 day, the human touch, the interactions, and also some cultures where you need to build that trust to do business. You don't do that virtually. So we see that the business travel is going to come back, as we are seeing right now in China, that is already fully back and has been restored domestic. So it will be exactly the same, and there's going to be a growth. The question is how long it's going to take to be back, because depends on this international coordination that I mentioned before. It could be 18 months or it could be 3 to 4 years. Everything depends on how these countries can work together, and also with the public and private collaboration. But the business travel will evolve. We'll have more some digital agenda, more tools, more technology, and more seamless experience you will see throughout the journey with biometrics and things that will be implemented. But we will continue to have a very strong business travel segment.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Latin America, because I know you are based in London, but you are originally from Mexico, and a couple of colleagues will join us in a couple of hours. And as you know, Latin America is a very segmented region in terms of economies, and that is also reflected in the exhibition industry. So do you think that the larger city destinations will become more dominant, more relevant, while the smaller routes may be disappearing, at least initially after this pandemic time?
It is very hard to tell right now. I think that there are a couple of factors that we have to consider. Latin America did not have the good connectivity, for instance. Sometimes to travel between countries in Latin America, you had to fly, remember before COVID, to Miami or to the US in order to have the right connectivity, or to Panama or Mexico in some cases. So connectivity is not ideal in Latin America. And I hope that it is going to stay at least the same, not worse, after the COVID, because some airlines are being impacted, as we know. The reality is that not all the countries will recover at the same time or in the same way. A lot is going to be depending on how much support the governments have provided to the sector. Why is that? Because if, for instance, business is already closed, what is going to be able to recover if there are no businesses there, like tour operators, local transfers, local restaurants? So we need to make sure that we protect the ecosystem so there's something there to recover. Now, to your question about the big cities and the secondary cities, I think it's going to be depending on the product offering. I think there's an opportunity here for the second series to have more offering, and also try to maximize the opportunity of the businesses and during the recovery, but they need to make sure that they do that right now. There are two agendas that have been accelerated, the digital agenda and the sustainability agenda, and we just need to make sure that we are ready and we are prepared from when the recovery is coming. And that would suggest for these destinations to work with experts such as yourselves and others, so that they are ready to embrace that opportunity and recover faster.
Okay. Do you think that there will be a region that will recover faster in terms of the travel industry, or a region that offer better conditions for a faster recovery?
That's a great question. As we have seen, China has already recovered domestic, 95%. Asia depends on the country. Some countries are doing better than others. Japan, for instance, has done a better job domestic, not great international. They are still concerned. We have seen South Korea did a great job with the outbreak, and now I think that they are recovering quite well. Europe, we were hoping that Europe was going to have a recovery in the summertime. Unfortunately, the lack of coordination that we had in Europe during the summer and the messages conflicted didn't help for the recovery. And this is the largest region of the world for travel and tourism. So right now, again, it's very hard to say. What I can tell you is that we hope that Europe will lead the way and help us to recover. And also we hope that in the US, a lot of things are going to start happening. And because now that the election is over, we will see some things moving faster as well. And the same thing with some other countries of the G20. So it's going to be depending on this collaboration. The US and UK, the partnership is key. US and the US also, we need to open those air corridors and more effective resume international travel. And at the same time, I think Asia, we will see also some interesting growth. Latin America, let's remember that it was the region that came at the end to COVID. Same with Africa. So perhaps they will recover also at the end. We will see. Depends if they can leapfrog or not and learn from what happened in Europe and what happened in Asia.
Okay, now let's talk about the vaccine. The WHO, which is the World Health Organization, expects the vaccine to be available before the end of this year. But of course, it will take some time to make some tests, although we have heard good news about the test so far. So what is your take on the timelines for that?
As you say, there are more than 160 vaccines on the works. And there is a group of vaccines that they are already in phase 3. Pfizer, Moderna, for instance, the Oxford vaccine, and others are going to start deployment, as we have learned, early December. The first group is healthcare workers, such as doctors, nurses, and of course, the elderly above 80, at least that in the UK. In the UK, I understand that has already assigned groups for people so that they know when they will be able to get the vaccine. And that's also happening in some other parts of the world. So that's encouraging news. And I think that we're going to move pretty fast. But what we need to remember is not only the vaccine, we need to have both paths. One is the vaccine for the vulnerable groups first, and then the rest. And the other one is the testing. We cannot stop doing the testing and the contact tracing, because that's the only way that we are going to be able to isolate the people infected, such as what has happened in China and South Korea, Iceland, and in many other destinations. Greece, for instance, has done a lot of testing as well. They have been very successful. So we need to continue doing testing before departure, include testing in the travel experience, but also testing locally so that they can isolate the infected people. And more, finally, we see officials sharing information, learning from each other, and collaborating with the private sector so that we can move in the right direction. The next weeks are crucial, and before the end of the year, we should be able to have more idea about the recovery and how would that evolve and happen.
Okay, so final question. You were just saying that at the end of the year, we will have more news. So far, do you have some numbers in terms of how domestic and international travel has recovered so far, or is it too early to say something about it?
Well, so far, according to our estimations that we work with Oxford Economics, domestic is still down 30-35% global average. Some countries, as I say, China has fully recovered. The US is okay. Germany recovered domestic, Italy too. Here, the UK also is recovering domestic. And we have a lot of examples around the world. Japan also has recovered. So in average, I would say it's still down, as I said before, 30-35% domestic. International, unfortunately, is not the case. It's the opposite. 65% down, that's the international. And that's why we need to resume international travel. We need to have these hubs to be connected again with no quarantines, like the UK and the US, for instance, or Dubai and the UK, or Paris and the US, or Fiumicino Airport with Milan already has an air corridor, and they are planning to do another one with the US. So that would help us, and we need to continue pushing in that direction so that we can resume international travel, and as that's the backbone for our sector and for commerce as well.
Okay, so let's wrap up because we are kind of running out of time. So Gloria, can you send UFI members a short message?
Ana Maria, thank you for inviting me. What I can tell you is that our sector is very resilient. We will recover for sure. We need to continue pushing in the same direction that we're pushing, working with the UK government and all the governments around the world so that our message is clear and loud. We need to resume international travel and replace these blanket quarantines for just testing and quarantines for the people infected. The only way to recover in the past, and we should be able to do that again in a shorter time frame so that we can bring back the livelihoods that have been impacted and bring back the sector that is very important for the global economy. And thank you for all the work that you're doing and all your members and for all the support in advance. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Gloria. It was an amazing presentation. This is Gloria Guevara, CEO of the WTTC. So I'm positive that our delegates really enjoyed your presentation. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. And all the best. Bye-bye.